has been the response of the UK to other individuals returning from Syria, and what, in Cage's view, should be the response to her?
Well, I think in the case of Shamima and people of her age in particular, not only is she a British citizen, but she left at time in 2015 when she was just 15 years old. Clearly, I think she was groomed by some so-called ISIS people and eventually got to Syria, and within weeks of being there got married at this early age, and I don't think she knew very much about what was happening at the time. And how Britain has dealt with such cases before in the past, it varies. Some people have been brought back and have readjusted into society. Varies series of measures that have been carried out. As far as Cage is concerned, we believe that such people should be treated as British citizens, as minors. Of course, society needs to be protected, but the Muslim community also needs to know the wider picture about what ISIS was all about. And then in the light of that, being able to reasonably make a decision on some of these young children who really have not been able to properly determine what it is that they were doing at that time, even if they are responsible now. In her case, of course, she's lost 2 children that have been killed during the bombing. She has a child that's coming or due to be born very soon, and she wants to come back home. She says, to quote her, that she has no regrets about being there. She said that she saw people beheaded, she saw heads of people in bins, and it didn't faze her. But she's also said that ISIS didn't deserve a victory because of the abuses they were carrying out. So clearly there are some things that are contradictory, but nonetheless they show a complicated situation in terms of person's mind development.
Moazzam, what has been the response of other countries, Western Europe or elsewhere, to such cases similar to Shamima Begum's case, in the case of them returning with infants or them returning from the battlefield themselves? Has there been some attempt to reach out to them, recuperation, reinduction in society? And what's the status of those children born to those men and women, of course, that went to Syria, to Iraq, in the hope of joining the so-called Daesh?
Well, those are important, interesting questions. They vary from place to place, to country to country. The general view here in the West is, at least the populistic view, is that we don't want any of these people. They make their bed, they should lie in it, let them die there. Interestingly, the people who have been most affected by them, for example, the Kurdish or other groups in Idlib, for example, they haven't gone to the extent of saying that these who are people who are essentially have been beheading us, torturing us, killing us, that the women should be separated from their families, which is one of the things that happens on return in some cases. So some people in those places have said that we've attempted to rehabilitate and bring some of those people back into Syria, for example, and on the condition that they understand what they did was wrong, and on the condition that they disavow themselves from ISIS. In Europe, as I said, there have been various reactions. In France, for example, they just announced that they're bringing back 150 former ISIS people, including men, women, and children. Now, it may be the case that they're bringing them home, but they're bringing them home to prosecute them. And the reason why they want to do that is they say, on a practical level, that it's easier to have them in our prisons than it is walking free in Syria, perhaps where they might get released by the Kurds and others. So there are varying different types of responses from different places. Few of them are very sympathetic, I have to say. But I think in the case of children and the case of minors, there is a sense that they at least are not responsible for what they've done or for which situation they happen to be in.
Has there been any talk of rehabilitation? Now, rehabilitation is not new to the UK. During the time of the Irish crisis in Northern Ireland, there were a series of individuals that the UK government found necessary to rehabilitate and to re-evaluate what were their positions in relation to the UK. Has any MP stood up with this intent, or have they been lobbied or asked, even privately, that should the UK start on some program of rehabilitation? There is, and there are some controversial ones, like the Prevent program, where people are channeled. It's really the channel part of the Prevent, where people are sent over to various
de-radicalizers, for want of a better word. The problem with that is that Prevent itself has become highly toxic and something that is mistrusted in the community. Had it been grassroots or had it been organic from the community itself, a Muslim community-based program, then I think it would have been welcomed, and several people would have. Indeed, I've spoken to many people and helped to dissuade them from joining Daesh in the past without actually calling it a program or so forth. It's just something I would do as a Muslim, and many Muslims do regardless. But the problem is when it has the government's brand on it, because the government has been itself involved in bombing and killing and so forth in that region, most people don't take it seriously and trust it. So there needs to be a grassroots community-based program that helps these people to reintegrate, to resettle, to understand that they were on the wrong path. And there are many people in the community who want to help them and are helping them in that. Is the difficulty how toxic the government language has been in the past in trying to take almost an entire community's normative beliefs as being radical or extreme, which we reject.
Focusing on Shamima Begum finally, Moazzam, what will happen if she comes back? I mean, will this create issues for herself, for her family, and her general community?
Well, as I said, there are several people who have already returned. Several women who have returned who were with ISIS. Some have been prosecuted, others live a normal life. So a determination is made in each case and on a case-by-case basis. And if there's evidence to prosecute them for criminality, then rest assured they will be prosecuted, because the British government is not slowing in doing that. The fear is, of course, is that if she comes back and she has a baby and the child is literally breastfeeding, how do you do that? How do you separate the child from the parent in that regard? And then there's the other issue, of course, is that the separation may happen. They will argue that this woman, she had her child in a terrorist-designated region, therefore she's not fit to look after her child, and be made a ward of court.
Moazzam Begg, Jazakumullah khairan for joining us, Outreach Director, Cage UK, joining us from the UK. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That was Moazzam Begg. Apologies once again for the line out there, discussing the case of Shamima Begum, still a citizen of the UK, in fact, and requesting to come back after a 5-year, close on to 5 years, actually 4.5, but approaching the 5th year of her sojourn, of her time in Daesh, or so-called Islamic State territory, at 9 months pregnant, having lost the first 2 children, married off to one of the fighters, unknown about his status. He's of Dutch origin. And she making a plea, a request to come back, currently in a refugee camp somewhere on the Syrian border. We'll see how that case develops and what input we can gain from those assisting her return from